Shashi Tharoor ji.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to join my friend and learned party leader, Adhiranjan Chaudhary, in saying that we support very much the objectives of the bill. We want India to be a destination for international arbitration, but we have issues with the content and the text of the bill. After all, what is the problem the bill is trying to address here? They are trying to address the absence of a credible international arbitration centre in India, which therefore is not attracting foreign companies, as many of the other eminent speakers who are themselves lawyers have pointed out. We need a credible centre, but it must be one that's attractive enough and interesting enough so when foreign companies are concluding contracts, they will want to come here rather than, as Pinaki Mishra was pointing out, taking all their cases involving Indian disputes to Singapore. This is something we really need to take very seriously, and therefore, very clearly the new centre has to be better than what we already have, which has been rightly criticised by preceding speakers. And the fact is that if we want companies to come here, it must meet the highest possible standards. And this is where the bill disappoints. After all, you're trying to look at institutional arbitration, whereas in our country's culture, most arbitration tends to be ad hoc. People just agreeing on a contract between themselves to arbitrate in a one-off procedure. But when you're looking at international arbitration, you're certainly looking at institutional arbitration, and there we have to overcome the inefficiencies of the past that everyone has already pointed to. And also, the purpose of arbitration is to cut through the existing inefficiency of the court process, which has made ease of doing business such a problem because of the difficulty of fulfilling contracts. When obviously contracts are resolved and arbitration moves in a swift manner, then of course the whole process is where companies are encouraged to come here. Now, the more bureaucratic the nature of the centre and the more government control there is, unfortunately, the less attractive it's going to turn out to be to others. We're seeing this already with the Chinese Arbitration Centre, or CTAC, which is unfortunately very similar to what our government has come up with. The CTAC is also an arbitration institution governed by the government of China, and no one considers it to be autonomous of the government, and people don't like going there, whereas the Singapore International Arbitration Centre obviously attracts all the number of cases we've been hearing about, as does the ICC in London. Now, what is striking is, remember that it's not you and I and the lawyers here who have to be happy. Those who will be taking cases to the court are foreign companies for the most part, or companies that are concluding contracts between a foreign company and an Indian company. If you don't set up an institution that appeals to them, then all your efforts will go in vain. So I'd like to urge 6 specific suggestions on the Minister under 4 board headings very briefly. One is on autonomy. Clause 11 of the Act states that the General Superintendent's direction, control and management of affairs shall be vested either with the central government or with a custodian appointed by the central government. This is a mistake, Mr. Speaker. There is no question that every study on arbitration shows that independence of the arbitral institution is key when it comes to why companies choose an institution for arbitration and what is the choice of a forum for dispute settlement. So when a foreign investor is coming here, if they don't think ours is autonomous of the government, there's going to be a problem. And let's face it, in our country, a lot of the disputes involve PSUs, as Shaukat Roy pointed out, metros and so on, and therefore the influence, or even the perceived influence of the government over the arbitration centre would work against the perception of its autonomy. So I would have suggested that you ought to leave the authority with the chairperson of the committee and not with the government or the custodian, or you remove the terms direction and control from clause 11, so you don't leave this control in a way that undermines autonomy. Second one, sir, flexibility of rules. Clause 32 says that every rule under the Act has to come before Parliament. But the fact is that while you can say that for rules regarding the constitution, composition and internal function of the organisation, arbitration proceeding rules have to be amended very, very often. In fact, I was checking, the Singapore Centre has amended its rules in 2010, 2013, 2016, 2017. This is necessary to keep up with the changing, speedy perspectives and requirements of the international issues and international users of arbitration. And therefore, for you to lock our centre into a situation where they can't amend anything without coming to Parliament puts a burden on them and a burden on us, which I think is not the intention, because you'll actually reduce the efficiency of this procedure. So I would suggest you exclude the arbitration rules from the set of rules which require parliamentary sanction under the clause. Show that you're responsive to the needs of the clients. And then the last point, sir, a broader mandate is needed so that you can actually develop more expertise, create a vibrant arbitration community here by including in the terms of the New Delhi Centre education, skill development, awareness in arbitration, and secondly, to create opportunities for young professionals to develop expertise, which is something the London Centre, the International Centre Chamber of Commerce, the Singapore International Centre all do. They all have specific programs targeted for the development of young arbitration practitioners, whereas, as Professor Roy pointed out, all we have is retired judges monopolizing our arbitration work. Why don't you include in the mandate of the Centre these things? You can do that under the rules attached to the bill. And finally, in reaching the higher standards, statistics must be maintained, as all the other prominent arbitration centres do, and transparency must be absolutely essential. There is sadly very little reference to transparency in the bill. My suggestion is, so while your objectives are very laudable, and we must make India an arbitration destination, your bill doesn't go far enough. If you're going to create a centre, don't create one that fails to fulfill the very purpose for which you're creating the centre by failing to attract the people you want to attract. My advice would be to either include these additional points and bring back the bill, or if you insist on passing it today, because we don't want to oppose it, let me say at least include these suggestions and points in the arbitration and conciliation law, which is also lapsed and which you need to bring back to this House. But reconciling the two would give you a better centre, and one that will fulfill the laudable objectives that the government says it's seeking to fulfill through this law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.